I think I got kind of orange pilled and privacy pilled in this way when Snowden exposed all this surveillance that was happening by default through every system you've ever touched. That's when I started treating all digital infrastructure as inherently recording devices. Like, they're trying to take information, and then even if someone doesn't really want or intend to store the information, like, it's possible that it gets leaked through a hack. And when it comes to money, that reveals all the relationships someone has. And without privacy, there's no way for that to be free. And for Bitcoin to kind of live up, in my mind, to what it was meant to do, be censorship resistant, you need to have privacy.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to Bitcoin Audible. I am Guy Swan, the guy who has read more about Bitcoin than anybody else you know. We have got Dan Gould on the show today. And this was such a good conversation. And there is something very elegant and like something that I deeply appreciate about finding the simplest way to do something in kind of an automatic, and it can be implemented everywhere and people wouldn't even notice sort of way of just like making the thing work to get the first piece of a much bigger picture. And this is one of those tools. If you've ever heard of Payjoin, Dan, actually get to talk to him about, a lot of the origins and what he worked on and where he started in privacy, because he actually kind of started on this and was going in this direction way back in 2017 and 2018. And started with, working with Tumblebit or interested in Tumblebit and the original Payjoins and how BTC Pay implemented it and all of these things. And we kind of get into why it didn't work or what the trade-offs were or why it could or could not be universal and what actually needed to be solved. Like, what was that missing piece that they're tackling now? With a ton of contributors, right? Like Dan is just on the show to talk about his piece of it and the project at large, because they're at a really amazing pivot point. And so it's like perfect timing to like really dig into it. A shout out to him. Don't forget, I'll have links and stuff in the show notes so you can follow and check all this stuff out. A shout out also to our sponsor, to Bitbox and the Bitbox O2 Nova. Everybody, you guys know I love the Bitbox hardware wallet. I have like 3 of them or 4 of them. I don't know. And I also have little crypto cloak cases. They're so cool. And I have like they're like color coded and stuff. I love it. I love my Bitboxes. But if you are not holding your own keys, you need to be. Bitbox is just an unbelievably easy, and speaking of elegant and simple ways to do something, of just solving a problem, I really just think it's one of the best. Integrate into your own stuff, use their software, use their hardware wallet, like start to finish, a simple setup to just holding your own keys, and do so securely and safely. And it's just a solid all-in-one package. And in addition, you can get all of the complexity and cypherpunk stuff and custom setup if you want, but you don't need it if that's not your thing. And I know this because I have some that are just set up normally, and then some that are set up, connected to my own node. And I have like a bunch of different pieces of it in multi-sig and all this stuff. So check it out if you haven't. And I got a discount code, and it's also a really, really great way to support the show, to let them know that I sent you, and you get to hold your own keys. You get to be like a solid, true Bitcoiner. So support the show and hold your own keys. Win-win. So check them out. Details, all the stuff is right down in the description of this episode. And with that, let's get into today's chat. This is all about Payjoin. The time has come for privacy on Bitcoin with Dan Gould. Dan, welcome to the show. Welcome to Bitcoin Audible, man. Good to have you.
Guy, thanks for having me. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. So we got a lot to get into. I got you on just because I was reading about and really want. I actually have not dug into Payjoin V3. I don't even think I've used Payjoin except maybe once because I had it like turned on in BTC Pay. I want to say like it occurred with a transaction. I remember thinking there was something funny about it, but I don't know if it's even automatic or how it works. But I've always loved the idea. It's just not something that I've ever managed to come into contact to. Like just kind of had available. Like if somebody ever was just like, if I was at a merchant and I like scanned and somebody was like, "Do you want to pay join?" I'd be like, "Oh well, yeah," I'd hit the button, But integration just kind of in my circles it always just ends up being lightning, right? So I wanted to kind of dig into that in UX and all that stuff, but also just like where is it? Like what's the state of it? What are the new things? You've got DevKit on the way, and let's start with your background because I don't know much about you either. What kind of led you to what you're doing with privacy, and also why are you working on privacy? Like, why are you building these things in particular? Why is it important to you?
Why is privacy important to me? I'll definitely get there, but I do want to touch on one thing you already said, which is like that your experience with Payjoin was automatic and in the background. And that's kind of the whole point that I want
That's
to
the dream, right?
hammer in with this call is you shouldn't even need a button to come up and say it happens. It's just when you're using Bitcoin settlement, it's done by default on the base layer, which also kind of gets me into why I'm working on this, where it started. Like I have been working on the Bitcoin privacy problem for at least it's 2018, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, following along with like C# land, what the BTC Pay guys were doing, what the Wasabi guys were doing, and incrementally coming to the understanding that, okay, we need Bitcoin privacy to be solved in this automated way at the base layer. You can build a bunch of stuff at higher layers, but if it's not at the base layer, you're always going to have leaks. And I saw everyone doing this through applications. So like download this privacy wallet and take this privacy action and get privacy, which leaves everyone that doesn't make that their priority, seconds to that. They don't have that.
Yeah.
So the approach, I just came to this place that it needs to be automatic. I think I got kind of orange pilled and privacy pilled in this way when Snowden exposed all this surveillance that was happening by default through every system you've ever touched. That's when I started treating all digital infrastructure as inherently recording devices. Like they're trying to take information, and then even if someone doesn't really want or intend to store the information, like it's possible that it gets leaked through a hack. And when it comes to money, that reveals all the relationships someone has. And without privacy, there's no way for that to be free. And for Bitcoin to kind of live up, in my mind, to what it was meant to do, be censorship resistant, you need to have privacy. Satoshi even left us some breadcrumbs there. We can get into that. And Snowden has tweeted about this, even kind of clashing with Gladstein on Twitter, which I think is kind of funny, about how like, we still don't have privacy despite all the advances. And it's just a huge problem. There's a lot to be done. And I feel like nobody, at least when I started, was taking this problem first approach. So it was a big opportunity. And now it's just become kind of part of who I am. I'm stubborn and very interested in seeing the state of the art advance.
Stubborn's the best. Especially when you're stubborn about something you want to see in the world. Like stubborn is how those things actually arrive. No, I totally agree, especially in the whole, like it has to be automatic thing, because your anonymity set is the thing that makes privacy work, right? Especially when you're talking about something like a public network and the nature of Bitcoin. and this is why something like Taproot and cross input signature aggregation, like all these like supposed proposals that the intent was for them to be widely used, were it seemed very important to that conversation to me in the past, and probably still are, but that you can actually make it economically efficient. Privacy has always been a cost. It's always been like something that you had to care enough about to go do, to go get Signal or crypto chat, or like you had to go get another app and then get your friends on it, or, figure out how to, manage your PGP key or whatever it is, right? You always had some other cost, some other friction. You had to get what was the old browser extension, the Beaver thing that wiped your foot, like messed up your fingerprint, like yeah, privacy patcher. But there was always like some other tool, right? I can't tell you how many times I had to download a little thing or do a little thing or get a different browser or a different chat. And because of that, like 99.9% of people don't have it, and they're not private. It's just like, if you have to do extra steps, if it's not built in, then it's just not, people are not going to care about it. They're going to go for convenience.
Yeah, and even the people that want it, like you were talking about anonymity set, like you have no way to get it because you're just like, it's clear.
If you're by yourself, if you're the only one that doing it, it's like, oh, that's that guy who likes privacy.
Right.
And it is pretty powerful, I think, that despite the fact that I've never, I don't think I've personally interacted or done anything with it other than turn it on in BTC Pay, that I am pretty sure I want to go back now because I still have all that history, but I've like since switched my setup. But I'm pretty certain that I did a transaction with somebody, and it did a pay join, and I can't remember what it was that triggered me going, oh wait, is that what that was? But that's potent, that if that is exactly what happened, that it just happened without me interacting, without me doing anything. Because I make a point to send everything through Wasabi these days because I'm on a Bitcoin standard, so I pay employees and people I work with constantly and get paid constantly, and I don't want to have connections all over the place to my Fold account or my River or my business wallet, for my personal wallet, my vault, like separating those things is like critical. And I know I don't have like perfect privacy. Somebody could probably do an enormous amount of work, but just having naive, you can't just like look at it and see everything. It's like super critical for just basic safety reasons. It's not even like freedom and censorship resistance. Like, no, just like, don't let everybody know everything that's going on, because not everybody's a good person, especially all the stuff going on with France. And have you kept up with or seen all this? Like
You're talking about a physical attack because of like some records getting leaked through government bureaucracy. Yeah.
Yeah. Literal mafias that like now run on kidnapping people, cutting off fingers, threatening to beat and rape wives and kids to get your Bitcoin. Like literal just horrible, like the most insane $5 wrench attack. And it's been systematized. It's been institutionalized. There's just systems of people like that work for this thing that does this. And governments are lately in the business of not even helping. They want low-hanging fruit. They want to, they want to kick out the illegal immigrants that have just chilling in their house. They don't want to kick out the people with guns and the murderers because they might get killed, right? Like they don't want to do things that are difficult. And it just leaves like such a huge set of misincentives. And it's bad. And like privacy is so important. Like if we don't take charge of it ourselves, like we're not going to get it. Nobody's going to give it to us,
Absolutely not.
And so maybe expand on that and like give me a little bit about your background And then how you have been tackling. You said you've been working on it since 2018. You've been working on this sort of stuff.
Yeah. So I was fortunate enough in college to already be sort of interested in Bitcoin and on, I think, Reddit, looking at it. And I saw this Tumblebit paper. I don't know if you remember back in the day. It's like payment channels
Tumblebit!
and a Tumblr.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who the hell wrote this? And Ethan Heilman wrote it. And
What year was this?
I think this was 2017, 2018. Yeah. So he's the co-author of the OpCat TapScript BIP, amongst many other things. That's what he's famous for recently, as well as I guess the post quantum BIP 360. But he was my TA for probability and statistics. And I was like, wait, I know this guy's name. And so I went and I worked with him in the undergrad lab. I really wanted to contribute to open source, didn't know what to do, contributed to some config on the C version of Tumblebit, which wasn't even being used. Nicholas Doria from BTC Pay was already working on the C# version at this point. This is even before BTC Pay, as far as I know, and Bitcoin had existed. So he was working on this C# version. And that's how I fell right into the world, because even the Wasabi guys, they all worked on Tumblebit. So I spent a winter living in my friend's apartment. I stayed on campus and worked in the lab on this privacy thing that was really cool, and hung out with some smart people. And I just got really stuck on that problem since. So I had one other attempt before focusing on Payjoin, which was a Chaincase app, which is a fork of Wasabi. I'm like, okay, I want this on my phone, because I'm like, I don't want to open my laptop every time I make a transaction, because at that time, Lightning was not a big thing for payments. I think there's a big distinction between Lightning payments and general Bitcoin settlement now, but that was not the case then. So I was like, oh, I want this on my phone. That's the blocker. And then worked on that for a while and realized, okay, an application is not the thing that's going to solve this problem fundamentally. We have to go and look at what Satoshi wrote and see what's the real problem. And there is a privacy section in the white paper I'm sure you're familiar with, and it says all the inputs of a transaction necessarily come from the same person. So if you got, if you withdrew some Bitcoin from an exchange, or you got something, you did some contract and you have a coin, when you spend that to the next person, all those coins show up as inputs to a transaction, and the person you're paying can see, you have all this money, and maybe $5 wrench attack you, or even trace it back further. And there was a bunch of work on Payjoin around that time that just started, and the same people, Nicholas Doria and Mr. Cooks, put it into BTC Pay server, and it got a huge amount of energy behind it. There were some barriers and reasons it never took off, as well as reasons that they focused, I think, it seems like they focused on what was working, which was BTC Pay, and Payjoin was not working. So they're like, okay, this is a secondary thing. And it left a edge for me to start turning it into something that all these wallets could use instead of just an application specific thing. And then teaming up with a whole bunch of people. There's now, I think the repository has 40 different contributors. So,
wow. Okay.
Turning it into something that's a greater effort. And now it's piloted in the Payjoin dev kit. So this version that got created is piloted in Bull Bitcoin Mobile and Cake Wallet.
Hey, Bull Bitcoin kills it with these sorts of things, man. They do such a good job at implementing. Shout out to Francis.
Yeah, serious shout out to Francis. Francis has been a very motivating ally. And this year you're gonna see a whole lot more integrations coming, because now the dev kit itself is generalized enough and stable enough that we can cut a version 1 imminently, and it'll fit with basically any wallet.
If you get Cake, there's no way they won't.
Yeah, they have it already. They've got the pilot since.
Okay, already got it. Of course they do.
2025. So now, if you open that wallet and you try to do an on-chain transaction,
Seth is always right there with that. I gotta give it to him. And And then Nunchuck, get Hugo and Nunchuck, and then everything that I do will be Payjoin because I know a number of people who just like kind of religiously use Cake. It's one of the best. Cake does not get enough credit. And then Nunchuck, I freaking love Nunchuck.
Me too. Yeah, we need a slightly different bindings. Like there's some more engineering work to do there, but it's not far. The tricky part is that Payjoin's interactive, right? So it requires communication back and forth, and most of the time when you're using Nunchuck, you're using hardware. So you either need to have the hardware plugged in, or you need a really clean user flow where maybe you have to even sign twice sometimes. If you're like receiving and signing, that's something that hasn't been tried yet. There's a lot of discussion that's happened, gone back and forth with like Bitcoin Safe, and Cove is in the middle of adopting this. So I think
Cove,
you're going to see it happen very soon, but it hasn't been the design focus yet, and there are still some kinks to work out.
Gotcha. So you brought up a couple things. One is you said there was an intermediary. There was kind of a middle thing between Tumblebit and then when you got into Payjoin. And then you talked about there were some barriers and some things that got in the way of earlier Payjoin. I am a big fan of postmortems. I love finding out why things didn't work. And so I'm curious, first off, did Tumblebit just kind of evolve? Like, is that like a precursor to, Wasabi, or are these like kind of separate projects with just the same theme and ideas, or Samurai or whatever?
Tumblebit was just too early for so many reasons.
It's just too early. Okay.
Like Tumblebit, Arc is really similar to Tumblebit, and Arc is winning now.
Arc?
Tumblebit is like you have to.
Arc is similar to Tumblebit? Really?
Very much so. Yeah. Because you have an operator that like forwards money once you pay it. So like I don't know what it's called in Arc, if it's the operator, but like your actual, like your Arc has to have as much funds as people who are using it. So Tumblebit's kind of the same thing. And it also came out before, at least the FinCEN guidance had dropped. 2017 guidance, I think. 2019. It was 2019. FinCEN put out guidance talking about a difference between anonymizing software and anonymizing services, and how the software is legal. The services are money service businesses and need licenses to be legal. And so that was way up in the air. And this company that was implementing it, Stratus, at the time was just like, we don't actually want to run this in the wild. They were a masternode shitcoin. So they wanted their masternode to be like the Arc service provider.
Fun fact, Stratus is the only crypto that I bought like a good chunk of because of Tumblebit. Like when I heard about it, and I was like, it was like 2017. I was like, okay, maybe this is something. Maybe, and I bought it, and it like shot up, and I was like, oh, I'm a genius. I didn't even take my principal out, like an idiot. No, I got crypto burned. Hard, and it was on Stratus. But like they implemented Tumblebit, and then it just kind of like fizzled out. Like I was interested in that, and the idea that like you could do. Stratus was going to like partner with Bitcoin, like that was their big thing, right? Is that like we're not enemies, we're not competing, right? But yeah, and then I think I ended with like 20% of what I put in, and I 10x'd. I mean, like all the bad decisions. I mean, cannot believe that like I could put in this amount and then turn it into this, and I didn't even take this back out. Like just so stupid, But anyway, it doesn't matter.
Could still go to the moon, man. You can still hold now. You never know.
You never know. Anyway, so they wouldn't implement it because it was a service.
Well, they implemented it. That was the crazy thing. They hired all these dudes and implemented it, and they just never they never shipped it as their masternode software. I think they realized they could make a lot more money hiring footballers, like soccer players, to say Stratus is good than the risk that was worth like putting the masternode out.
Yeah.
So, and like there was no Lightning liquidity problem that Arc later figured out they could implement, but like the principles were sound, and it could have even worked as a a payment channel thing. It was like payment channels and the Tumblr had two different modes in the paper.
Yeah, I kind of remember a lot of discussion about it because I was like reading and digging everything at the time, and it sounded like such a cool proposal, and there was like so many neat next layer or next step things that you could do with it, and that's why I was like, man, this could be a huge foundation, and like we could use it for general payments, and it would be cheaper and faster. You know, like there was just all this supposed benefits, but then. And then I lost my money in Stratus, and then I was like, well, what the hell happened to it?
And so what happened, I think, was Adam Fixor was really focused on like, just, I need to solve this privacy issue. The Tumblebit team is not it. They're not going to ship it. So he did the Zero Link paper, which turned into Wasabi's implementation. And the coinjoins were just a lot simpler. It's like, have everyone show up, you do one transaction. Tumblebit was multiple transactions. Just like Arc, you got to like peg in and peg out. And you have the non-cooperative case that ends up being like a bunch of different transactions. And that made it so it was much less clear that you could even make it economical. And then, of course, with CoinJoin, they made money. Like Wasabi was printing money. They could charge for
their business,
coordinating, and make a percentage and sustain the thing. So meanwhile, like I said, Payjoin was coming, but there wasn't any way like to kind of postmortem that side. So I had forked Wasabi, and that was the chain case thing. It had an iOS app, but it was interactive, and and synchronous. Everyone needs to be online at the same time and join around. And the operating system, iOS, is not reliable enough to do that when you have the phone in your pocket and it's a cell phone. Like, it's not going to be connected to the internet all the time. It's going to run out of battery.
Yeah.
So I realized a bunch from that. One, you need an asynchronous protocol, at least one that's like optimistic. Like it could proceed. It won't just fail. It won't get in a limbo state. And then you can't just depend on one application. You got to have a development kit. Like, you're already using Nunchuck and Cake.
Yeah.
Like your Bitcoin's probably already there.
You're not going to switch to a different wallet.
Yeah. It has to work with the wallet, and it has to work with the flow you're familiar with. So you're used to scanning a QR code, maybe to a BTC Pay merchant, and just clicking send. As long as the fees are within your parameter, you're sending them the right amount of money. So that needed to stay. And that's where I did some hackathons and just really realized, okay, this thing has more attention and no one's picking it up because there's no clear way to fund it. Like, there's no coordinator, so there's no revenue to be gained. So I worked for a bunch of time without any job to make the SDK work. And then AsiaRef had funded some of that work, and then OpenSats existed and were the first ones to fund that work specifically. And since we've had multiple incredible sponsors to multiple different contributors across the space, and that sort of the grant ecosystem made it possible to continue.
Sweet. That's crazy. No, I agree on the whole, like, and it's just another one of those things that, most developers are so focused on function. Can I get it to do what it does? And just forget to think about what the user's doing, and like, or what they're forcing the user to do, and whether or not, I think that's like 99% of the time, it's the reason things don't get used is because developers think about it from the code to execution, and the user thinks about it from what they're doing to accomplishing it. Like they think about it from interaction back, and developer thinks about it from code to function, which in some sense has to happen, but that disconnect still ends up being like a huge barrier. And it's funny that you bring up about Tumblebit and then Wasabi, and kind of like why one may have failed and then Wasabi succeeded. Is I have become like a simplicity maximalism, or a maximalist. Is I just want, like, especially with like vibe coding and stuff, like I've gotten like, I'd be like, oh, which is the best database and like all this stuff. And I've gone through like conversations and iterations on like I've been building like 3 or 4 different projects. One that I've hired a team to build, and then I'm doing like 3 of my own personal projects around it, or that will be plugged into it, so to speak. And and then I've got like a folder of like 40 little apps that I've built myself. And I've just, everything now, I'm just like, just make a JSON file. Just, just make a JSON file with this. It's like, nope, I don't want, if I have to prove this, just hash it and sign it.
This is funny though. There's a piece of lore here. I need to interrupt for this hilarious piece of lore. So Wasabi did use a JSON file as their database, and that caused so many problems because it turns out you actually need to have maybe more, like multiple threads reading and writing, but that's just I'm adding.
That's funny. No,
so, like, it does bite you at some time. Like, you want to be as simple as possible, but you do also, like, there's value in the software engineers who are literally screaming from behind you, like, don't do it that way. And you're like, but it's working fine. I've been doing this for weeks and weeks. It's like, software engineering.
Interactivity is a very different game. And everything that I've learned with pair core and pair drive, the stuff that we've been building, holy crap, you don't even think about how subtle and confusing some of the conflicts are, about like who's got what state of the index, and okay, and if it changes in 2 different places, how do you reconcile? I mean, just like there's so many little edge cases and nuances to it that obviously you can't just have like a basic, oh, everybody's got JSON. But on my own computer, I have switched everything to just like a JSON sidecar file or a markdown file, like across the board. It's like, okay, if I'm doing analysis on this thing and I'm pulling camera motion out of this entire film, it's just a motion.json. It's just a sidecar file so that I can import it into all of my other tools or whatnot. But yes, interactivity, and especially when you have to prove or come to consensus in like a group, dude, the complexity of that is kind of wild. And it's only because 10,000 of the people have solved 10,000 of those problems, 10,000 50,000 different ways over the past 40 years that we actually have solutions to all of those things. But slow and steady wins the race. Actually, you know what, there's probably a lot of the audience doesn't know what the hell Payjoin is. What is, explain Payjoin, explain what this is and how this is different from something like Wasabi.
Perfect segue talking about interactivity, because that's what Payjoin is. Payjoin is the most basic way to make a Bitcoin transaction where you introduce interactivity. And all this means is that the sender and the receiver both talk to each other when they're making the transaction. They both send messages to cooperate and have a transaction that has both of their input in it. So in this sort of batching history, rather than the privacy history, batching came up around Stratus time when the chain traffic got massive. There was way more people that wanted to transact on the base layer than the blocks had throughput for. So all the exchanges started batching withdrawals, where rather than make a transaction for every single settlement, they group them so that Alice, Bob, and Carol all get their withdrawal from the same transaction of the exchange with one input. And that also, this can get abstract real fast, but basically the exchange just doesn't need to keep so many different coins. They can do some more management, but if they batch together these transactions, that's how you get higher throughput in any database. So that's what's happening. Non-interactive batching. Payjoin is interactive batching, where instead of just the exchange in this example doing the batch, sending to the receivers, like I guess a simpler example is you and I are transacting, and you want to do a consolidation and I want to send you coins. And so rather than just broadcast a transaction that sends you some coins, I give you my proposal and I say, hey, do you want to pay join? And if you don't, you just broadcast it and you get your money anyway. But if you do, then you can do the consolidation where you put your coin as input and merge that with the incoming coin so that you only have one coin in the end rather than two. So you've now merged the incoming money, incoming Bitcoin with your existing one. We've combined a settlement, like a transfer, and a consolidation. The exchange example is kind of related to this idea of cut through, which is it maps more cleanly on the batching. So Greg Maxwell, 2013, came up with this idea of cut through, where like, oh, if these people premeditate their transactions, if I pay you, Guy, and you know you have to pay for your internet bill at the end of the month, you don't have to communicate that to me, but it would be great if when I sent you money, instead of giving me your address, you were able to give me the biller's address, and then I sent money to them, and the accounting all squared up. And Greg had a hole in this Bitcoin talk post where he's like, we don't know how to do the accounting. Well, a Payjoin is basically the thing that does that accounting. It's this protocol that goes back and forth where I can pay you, and then you can respond with a transaction that pays your biller, and I'm none the wiser. I get the Payjoin from you with your signature on it for your coin, whatever you want to forward to them. And the transaction still sends the same amount of money to you. So I sign that and broadcast.
So it's nearly like a child pays for parent out of band, right? Like almost in a sense, it's like I'm just adding to the transaction to forward it into a different place, but we're putting it together into one transaction rather than splitting it, doing each piece individually.
Right. By communicating out of band, we don't have to use the actual blockchain to communicate. So we can spend, like, we don't have to spam it as much. Like if I'm sending you some coins that you know you're immediately going to spend, we're actually spamming. Like, so you get, and there's some privacy benefit because these transactions can look indistinguishable from other transactions, making people none the wiser that multiple people are communicating. So this this assumption that Satoshi noted in the white paper, the most basic one, is no longer sound. Now, there's a bunch of caveats as to why Bitcoin privacy is much harder than this, but basically instead of that assumption that Satoshi left in the white paper that one person contributes all the inputs, Payjoin is the simplest protocol that lets multiple people contribute inputs.
The reason I think this is the correct path is because it's like one step. And it's also one step that is not like, it doesn't create some like new primitive at the base layer or, change our security assumptions or anything. It's just like, okay, rather than trying to find the everything all in one privacy solution that solves every single thing, it's like, well, no, let's just break this one heuristic, like just like a little bit, and see if we can get everybody to do it. And then like after you have that, then it's like, okay, well, what's the next one we want to break? Like you can just start to like piece by piece, block by block, expand this out into a true privacy like interactivity. And on that note, this is my big question. How the hell do you do the interactivity? How do you connect? How do you encrypt and communicate? Like this has like been my thing with Paracore and Paradrive and the stuff that we've been working on. Is it like, okay, how do you establish a connection? Whose server do you trust? Does everybody have to have tail scale? Are you communicating over the lightning gossip? Like how do you connect to this other person to exchange the information? And is it universal or is it just like all the wallets pick themselves and we just have like a schema for like what's the story there and how do you even solve that problem?
Yeah, there's a lot in your it was hard for me not to interrupt. There's so many things I wanted to respond
I'm sure.
Communication wise, I think Payjoin as the thing that works makes sense in this frame of, if you look at Satoshi's privacy hint as like, all the inputs come from one person, as a limitation not of Bitcoin, but of the frame of Bitcoin being non-interactive, then you realize, okay, interactivity is the thing that maybe addresses the privacy problem based on what he wrote. Like, what's the one piece, as you say, piece by piece, that we can move in that direction? I didn't always take this approach, but yeah, I think this approach, the research, I think, is far enough now that we have a bunch of pieces we can implement, and we have to kind of see based on where the wallets and services have appetite, have demand, like which pieces are we ready to deploy? And we have so much demand already, and the pieces are not ready. So like, let's focus on that. In terms of communication, we kept it as simple as possible, and the principle of least information too. So the whole protocol is designed to use cryptography that's already in Bitcoin Core. We don't want to introduce any dependencies to encrypt the payloads. And the BTC Pay version, I guess this kind of gets back to the postmortem there too. It didn't require any encryption, any universal encryption. So it was like, you need encryption, but it kind of left it up to people to do it. So there were some implementations that use Tor, some that use TLS, like HTTPS, the lock in your browser. But the BTC Pay implementation took off because it used plain HTTPS, because they were already running an HTTPS server, a web server, like regular web server encryption.
It's just sitting there. So
you send a request to the server that contains this fallback, and then the server's response contains the Payjoin. The server can negotiate and send you back the Payjoin. The issue with this was that you need a server, and there is mailing list posts back and forth. One that I think is that was referenced in the Async Payjoin, the next version's BIP, from Craig Raw, where he's like, hey, like, people aren't going to run servers. This is the problem. How do we fix this problem? And that breadcrumb led to the Async Payjoin protocol, where instead of running a server, anyone can run a Payjoin mailroom and offer it as a sort of public good. You don't get any money for running one of these. It's basically a mailbox, or like
Nostr relay.
Yeah, it's the same as a Nostr relay, basically. But it's a little dumber than a Nostr relay, because it also is just HTTP, oblivious HTTP, which means there's a mandatory proxy, so you don't leak your IP without needing to use Tor. Because although a lot of wallets use Tor, that's not something that really can be universal. If you go and look at wallets and services in the world, many just decide the trade-off is not for me. But oblivious HTTP is just like a little bit of sprinkle of cryptography on top of the typical web stack, and that's how Async Payjoin works. So instead of sending to the receiver's server, the sender and receiver both look at this mailbox, just like email, and the directory server, the mailbox, can't tell the different pieces of mail apart because they're all encrypted and they're the same size. And it doesn't get the IP address either. And so by depending on this dumb mailbox, Cake Wallet and Bull Bitcoin can negotiate a Payjoin together.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. So how's the mailbox set up? Like how is this just like run by, is like Bull Bitcoin just running one, and then Cake is running one just for the sake of its own users?
Bull Bitcoin and Cake have run them. They're not using them publicly right now, because if Bull Bitcoin like uses their own directory with their users who they're also syncing with without Tor, for example, now they're collecting all the IPs and they can correlate stuff. So right now there's a small list of publicly run servers, kind of like the default Electrum list if you open Sparrow. It's community servers, and the Payjoin Foundation stores this list and communicates with the people interacting. And so like Vintium runs one, for example. But anyone can run one. You can run one on a $5 VPS. Like, it's dead simple. Like you mentioned, a Nostr relay. It's specific to the application, but anyone can use it, and it just stores and forwards requests for a limited time before it drops them.
Nice. Okay. So how do you deal and or think about, like, could somebody just plug into this and just flood it to crowd it out? Or do they kind of have to have like mailbox addresses, like I have to know that it's bull Bitcoins. I have to connect to theirs specifically to flood them. Like how do you deal with like how do you deal with spammers? How do you deal with potentially malicious actors plugging into this?
Like Nostr, denial of service is not part of the protocol. It's like touched at the spec level, but it's left to the operators for the time being. Just practically in terms of how do we communicate, if you open your Bull Bitcoin wallet and click receive, what's going to happen is Bull Bitcoins has some cache of mailboxes that it's used in the past, and it's going to generate an address in the Bitcoin URI. So like Bitcoin : and then it shows your address and it shows some other information. That other information is going to have the URL of a directory server, as well as a public key and some other information. And when you give that to me to send you money, I then encrypt the transaction, the fallback, and I know what mailbox that you're listening to and what key you're using. So I can put it in there, and then you just listen to that one server and we communicate over that. And then if that server is not online when you're making the request, you can just choose to use another server. So it is like peer-to-peer in that it's not like a whole decentralized protocol. You're just using one server, but it's simple that way.
Nice. Again, simple. Simple usually wins. It's amazing how many, like over the years, like there's this like cool, it's seemingly cool proposal called Spider Chain, and maybe somebody's even still working on it. And I've read so many proposals for so many different things and like complex systems and stuff. And as much as I love like thinking about some of these constructions, there are many, many times where especially the more time goes on, that I think it's like, this is just too complicated. There's going to be too many things that go wrong, or too many things that like kind of an attack surface or vulnerabilities that like we wouldn't even know until so far into this, because of how complicated it is, because of how many pieces are trying to move and interact. And I love when it's just like, just how do you get it from A to B? Like how do you do this easily? How do you just let people know that this is what they need to look for? This is like just go to bricks are simple, and you can build a lot of stuff out of bricks.
Yeah. And that's another thing that helps with keeping the server super dumb, is you do all the complexity on the client, and you can put that in a universal toolkit, and then all the wallets can just do it, and they can share that infrastructure. And if it's simple enough, the infrastructure doesn't even need to be that expensive. We're talking about storing like an email's worth of data. This is not expensive.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about DevKit and how, like, for example, I'll give you a scenario. We're planning on plugging in Bitcoin and stablecoin, actually, Bitcoin and Tether, into our software. And I would love to make like Lightning and like a bunch of things like available by default. We're using State Chain, so we're using the Breeze SDK, or that's the intent right now.
Okay.
But I do obviously will have on-chain stuff, and I would love to have privacy. We're not really trying to make a wallet, so we'll probably just simplify this as much as possible, because that's not really the point of it. It's just to have that interactivity, because I think it's a layer that like you can really expand what you do when you realize you have payments and zaps in something easily. But in the context of, let's say we did be like, okay, let's make a fully fledged wallet. Let's be very serious about this, and let's add in privacy. I want to add in Payjoin. What does that look like for me? And what are all the pieces that I need to put in place to make Payjoin work for users, especially when what we're doing has a peer-to-peer communication layer? Like the whole thing is about like making little peer-to-peer spaces, so you have friends that you can say, it's like, oh, I want to make a transaction, you want to join me, kind of thing. And like, so let's say we actually had that layer sorted out. How would I integrate with something like the dev kit and utilize this?
I'm going to answer two different questions here, because I think I think honestly the answer is not pick up Payjoin dev kit and implement it. The answer is if you're using Breeze SDK to say, hey Breeze, you should use
There you go.
Payjoin here
Do it for me.
and then everyone can do it, because Payjoin is all about that on-chain settlement layer. And we're seeing, as I alluded to earlier, like 2018, all the activity had to be on-chain. But today, we've got Lightning all over the place and a bunch of different options for using Lightning at varying degrees of sovereignty. Where Payjoin really sits is between all of those sovereign layers. So if you're entering and exiting an ARC or a Cashew or a Fedimint, like that's where, or a Lightning node, that's where Payjoin makes a lot of sense. And it seems like the best way to preserve user privacy in what sounds more like a consumer app from a payment side. Like, I don't think you're trying to innovate in the way people settle. You just want like settlement in your app. So that is probably why you go off the shelf and you say, okay, Breeze is trying to figure out how we actually improve the settlement, and we take it from them. Now, if you were just an on-chain wallet and you wanted to use the Payjoin dev kit off the shelf or just do a demo, you could get it working in an afternoon now. I think it's around 2,000 lines of code to just get like a Payjoin example working. I don't know that means all of the errors are going to be handled gracefully and you're going to have all the persistence. This was as of like last fall. I actually did an implementation and counted all the lines. I think that's still around true. I don't think it's 10,000 lines. And we've really been focused on documenting it and making a reference that is somewhat instructive for someone vibe coding, so that you know what decisions you actually have to make and what decisions can be made for you, especially to keep things safe. So yeah, the off-the-shelf dev kit is in a bunch of languages now too. So we've got examples in Dart, Python, C#. It's the dev kit itself is in Rust, and we have a system of creating these bindings. So like if you like Cove, or I guess Bitcoin, for example, is in Dart, and so they're using the Dart bindings. So if you have some new language you want to service, rather than rewrite all this code, check for correctness, do testing, you just pull the dev kit off the shelf and plug it into your language.
Nice. Okay.
I really think there's a difference between payments and settlement. My mind has changed, and it's frustrating that like we are using the name Payjoin in some ways.
Unpack that. I want to know.
Like your day-to-day payment has a completely different mechanism than Fedwire settlements, like any sort of settlements between banks. And I think that's the same for Bitcoin. Like there's just different sovereignty requirements, different threat model with a Lightning payment of your coffee, which is what people obsessed about forever. They're like, Bitcoin can't be used for a coffee, so it's stupid. And now Bitcoin can be used for coffee and it's still stupid, right? Yeah. And versus like you're buying a house, or really, I think collateral for loans is the more important frame for settlement, because that's just how actual capital gets moved. So Payjoin is focused on that base layer, because if there's not privacy on the base layer, there aren't privacy other places. And I think that's where privacy is lacking the most. I think that's where it's hardest, because it's just the most limited medium. You're actually going onto this public ledger and creating a record forever. So having that interaction show up to do the settlements as simple as possible has been our approach. And that's why I mentioned now, okay, it's not just Dan sending money to Guy. It's like these entities. You have your Lightning nodes, your ARCs, like whatever sort of an exchange that are doing the settlement from time to time. Like that's where the actual volume is happening on the Bitcoin network. And those settlements are what are getting optimized. And if they can save some money, they have a big incentive to do it. Yeah. So that's our approach. Versus the payments, we kind of have solved with Lightning now. I think the Square terminals turning on was a huge moment where it's in the background now. You click the toggle when you walk up to the Square terminal. You take out your phone and you scan it, and they don't even take on-chain Bitcoin. It's just a Lightning QR code, because that is how the instant experience is served. You can't be waiting for a confirmation when you're in a cafe.
Mhm.
So the use cases and experiences have specialized and will continue to. And I think we need to, like, the original Payjoin experience where the merchant is running the server, just, it made sense for Bitcoin in those days where it was nascent. And if you just wanted to kind of do a demo, you were going to do on-chain Bitcoin. But like, grown Bitcoin settles into layers, and we need to know what layer needs what kind of solution.
Yeah. No, there's so much in kind of what you just said. So I fully agree on the whole settlement and payment thing. And I've talked about and said as much on the show, probably a dozen different ways over the years, because I think it's a failure to recognize just how deep capital markets are, and like what the various layers and purposes of all the different types of transactions and exchanges there really are. And it's crazy to me. I'm curious actually what you think about this, because you mentioned Lightning. I think about it as like, yeah, Lightning's basically solved most of that problem, especially when you start talking about ARC service providers and LSPs and state chains and all of these things merged together, right? These things being able to talk because of the you can think about like the interpayments web of Lightning that connects them all together, makes them all standardized essentially. And it's wild to me the number of people who still don't get that there must be a hierarchy of how to exchange. There must be different types of exchange and different degrees of sovereignty and different degrees of security. Not just because, you need layers and you're going to have various trade-offs for layers, not even like purely technicality, but purely operationally, like from the user perspective and from the business perspective, you need different things to be prioritized and different things to actually be softened, like to loosen a little bit. I'm curious what you think about, some people say it's like, Lightning has, a lot of transactions don't go through, which I don't even understand. Like, I don't have any problem. And I guess I mostly just use LSPs, or I have like a wallet that, I guess it's mostly LSP wallets. And I had just one or two big fat channels with my main node that I'm in the middle of swapping over. But how do you think about Lightning in comparison to things? I think people are just like, we don't have full, like, I don't even know how to say it, like fully sovereign, fully decentralized, everything's non-interactive payments for everything that could be everywhere at 8 billion people. And so we failed. And all I can think is that like we literally have a system where you can have a fully functional bank that is entirely permissionless. You can use it no matter where it is in the world, and it's fully non-custodial. And it's like, how do you miss the quantum leap that is from fiat, like from what we're dealing with now? And you're like worried about, like, sure, there's still things to build, but when is there? Please tell me where the finish line is for this. Like that's a 50x improvement. A non-custodial, anywhere in the world, no local jurisdiction, potentially even private bank that with no KYC, with no nothing. I mean, like, that you could just pick a service provider from anywhere on earth, and it could literally be a friend. It could literally just be some dude. Like I think it was like Callie ran Lightning Tip or whatever that one that was in Telegram. We used it for like 9 or 10 months. He was running it on 2 Raspberry Pis in his home, and it had like 50,000 users, 100,000 users or something. He was essentially a non-custodian. Like it just, it's just wild to me. It's like, how do you not see it? But anyway, without answering my own freaking question, I want to know what you think about that, because you specifically brought up this idea that there should be this separation. And how do you think about it from the context of like criticisms on where Bitcoin currently is in its evolution?
It's evolved so fast that I think most people's opinions are just behind. Like, I don't even stay on the cutting edge of Lightning tech. Like, it's your money. You're not gonna, people go to their local bank branch on the corner for 50 years and never consider different products. They just go there and they write their paper checks because that's what they've always done, and it works and it doesn't cause them any problems. So I think when people use something new, or if you use Lightning like 4 years ago, well, the anecdote that I like the most was right when Lightning Labs released their iOS app. Like, technically there was a LND node on the phone, and you could fund it, and you could make an outbound channel, but there was no way to make an inbound channel. And there was just like, there was no way to receive a Lightning payment. It was very confusing. And I remember MIT Bitcoin Club event, like no one could make a Lightning payment happen. So if that group of people cannot do it, like it can't happen. And that's why that app didn't work. And that's why like we have LSPs now. And now, oh my God, we've got async payments happening with LDK. Is very exciting because this stuff just moves so fast. So I think when there was, even like 3 years ago, there probably was 98% success rate on Lightning, which is insane. That's like broken. That's, for a payment method, that's broken. I remember going places and watching transactions get tried 2 or 3 times, like at the Bitcoin Expo. And we're at the Bitcoin Expo and the payments don't work. This is really weird, but that's totally changed. I think, especially if people are paying a professional vendor. Like if you go to a Square terminal and have your payment fail from a wallet that you've heard of before, I would be very surprised. It just doesn't happen anymore. I don't know if I lost the thread there.
It's funny in the context of like the payment doesn't happen or it fails or whatever. Is which wallet was this? Is it Phoenix that did it? I can't even remember what the experience was, but I remember thinking, oh, that's crazy, because it's like there's no reason for a Lightning payment to fail, because like if you can't get through on Lightning, you can still just do an on chain. You know what I mean? Like it's just it's not like you don't have an option. It just means that liquidity has to shift somewhere. And I believe I was receiving a payment. I think it was Phoenix, and I did not have enough liquidity, and it basically just told me we're splicing in additional balance, and you now just have to wait for a little bit, but here's the money. Like it just like showed pending or something. And I was like, see, like this is like the perfect example of why it's not a matter. It's purely a technical problem. It's like, okay, if there's not enough liquidity, we simply adjust. Like you simply need an automatic system for exchanging the payment code into a on chain, and then finish the payment on Lightning when it arrives. You know what I mean? Like it just, or open the channel with the new balance already to the user. People who would like complain about like failed payments, like, no, you literally just have to keep finishing. Like we didn't even have spliced channels. You had to do like 3 transactions to actually make adjustments. You didn't have the interactivity problem. Like there's just so many little things, again, building blocks. You like one little block, one little problem, one piece at a time. But it's like, it's obvious we're going to get there. Like the leap that we have, you give the example of the first LNT like wallet or whatever, like the leaps that we have gone. I use this all the freaking time and I don't think about it. And like, how could we not solve the rest of the problems, whatever, those still are at this point?
It's
I don't know.
Yeah,
it just is. There's too many people working on it. And it works too good already.
There's a lot of people that want to get in the way. Like that's the scariest part, is people are like, nah, I don't want this to happen. Like that's where things could, that's where the defense really needs to be mounted.
Yeah. I will say Steve from the Simple Steve or Steve uses words. I can't remember what his tag is. He changed it. But Steve will give me shit because like I've had like great Lightning experiences, and he owns a bar and has accepted Lightning. He like worked really hard to get it all work and get everybody trained on it. And then he's had like nothing but trouble. And like a bunch of people trying to pay him has just like not worked at all. And I know he's like super frustrated and just completely sick of it. So he'll give me shit for
I think some of that self-hosting world is changing a lot too, with everyone getting fed up with remote inference and the local inference being so much more available. Everyone, like, you see consumer hardware demand going absolutely through the roof, like multiples in terms of
through the roof,
costs. So there's demand for people to run their own stuff. And I think when the Lightning nodes first got on the scene, like pre-2020, say, or right around then, that's when cloud was kind of at its peak. And so everyone's like, I don't want to actually use a computer. Everything's going to be on my phone and it's going to be remote. And I think that made it even harder to run a node. But from what I hear, like way fewer people are interested in running a node because they saw people try to do liquidity management on their own. And it was a huge pain in the ass and the software didn't work. And oh my God, there's not even a way to back up. Like you have this channel state thing that's not the same thing as my seed words. And that wasn't figured out. Yeah. But I think, I don't know, over the past year, I've seen it be way quieter in terms of who's running nodes. But everyone that runs a node is like, oh, this got a lot easier. Actually, you can do it now. And I think we're going to see a resurgence in some node running in line with people running their own AI inference at home.
I kind of agree. I had a long conversation with somebody that like AI is literally making the desktop computer cool again.
Yeah.
Like it's bringing it back. And we're in a place, and this is part of kind of like my thesis, my thinking about where why I think this idea of like you can actually bring back peer-to-peer in a different way, and there's a way to make it work, not make it feel like a clunky peer-to-peer experience. And a lot of that is leveraging people who, like, we just have so many devices now. And I think self-hosting is just going to be something that people more and more think about think about specifically or directly more and more. It's like, what's happening to my data? Especially businesses. You know, there's so many, like, I think it's especially large business, like corporations or whatever, realizing they're using Claude and all of this stuff, are realizing what's happening is, you know, Mythos or Fable 5, whatever comes out, and they're plugging proprietary systems into this. They're plugging like, you know, some company has like literally a database system that they have invented themselves, a system for organizing, for collecting it, just gargantuan amounts of data and fine tuning it to like filtering and curating exactly this. And this is literally their business, is the curation, is how clean and specific and organized their data is, that in a way that nobody else does, or data that they have access to, that they literally sell. Like, that's their business, right? And so many of these things are just running behind the scenes that just aren't public. It's just like how they do things, or it's their software, or it's their back end, or it's their curated information. And these things are getting plugged into Claude or Anthropic servers. And then Mythos comes out and suddenly it knows how to do all of these things. Like suddenly it's able to answer questions, like it's looking at that proprietary data. It's able to come up with an idea for a database that just so happens to look a lot like Oracle's proprietary backend, you know, like just like there's so many different things that's popping up, is because like they're using those conversations that you're having in the context to then turn around and improve their models. And then they're literally taking their proprietary data, putting it into an intelligence structure, and then selling it back to them per token. And
People are catching on. Yeah.
People are catching on that that's what's happening. Is that they're taking all of they're getting a window into the proprietary data and the proprietary systems of the entire internet, and then turning right around and retraining their models and then selling it back to people as a token. And I think that is going to heavily shift how people think about privacy, because like businesses will die because they shared information with a model to try to get 5% speed up. That ends up costing massive token costs. Yeah.
It's hard to say how it'll pan out, because like, is this just the inevitability of the singularity? Like, does it really matter? Is this just human intervention that we're doing? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I understand and I can think about it that way. I can see that perspective, but then I also see it that like, what makes us human is tied to our privacy, is tied to our individuality, right? You're a very different person when you're being filmed versus when you're, in your kitchen. It's like, I'm making a pot and I'm putting my stuff in it. Like you act like you're you.
Sounds like you got a camera in my house.
Yeah. And I think the incentives and kind of the structure of society is even lost. Like, it's fundamentally different if everybody is actually being watched all the time, because like no matter how honest or extroverted someone is, there's almost always there's a public mask versus a private you. And if you're forced to have a public mask all the time, I think there's this level of anxiety and friction in the world that genuinely changes the outcome of its growth or progression. I would like to see, Payjoin being a perfect example is I think not to say that like, oh, well, data and systems and ideas should be proprietary. I just mean it in the sense that like what we want to keep private or we want to keep for ourselves, we should be building systems to allow that. And even as an open source maximalist, I think it's just better to share ideas, because you just want everybody to, but I'm not putting a gun to everybody's head to say, give me your ideas. I think cooperation is just the better game theory. But just like sharing and cooperation are better, socialism doesn't work. And it's not because that's not, it's the opposite. You can't force cooperation. That it's an oxymoron.
Yeah, privacy gives you that exit element as well as it lets voice happen somewhat too. Like, you don't need, not everyone
you need
needs
a push
to
and a pull,
say their opinion, but you got to be able to. Like, it's essential to have that like uncensorable congregation and communication.
Yeah.
Of course, I spend all my time on this. Like, yeah. I totally agree.
Unpack what you were saying there with AI and kind of where you think those things are going. What do you see about the big picture? Are you really hopeful for privacy and where things are going? Do you think? I think it's very easy to be dismayed and kind of depressed about kind of what's happening. But I think there's also a thread of like more people are aware of it because of how bad it's, frog in the boiling water kind of thing. If the slower it is and the harder it is to see, the worse it's actually going to be. But if it becomes very apparent all at once, that likely just means something may be done about it. So what's your perspective on that? What do you see in the kind of big picture of stuff?
I tend to be optimistic to a fault. So I don't have the most like confidence in my predictions about this. I'm not making huge bets on what I'm about to say, I don't think. But like, other than, I think Bitcoin privacy demand is going to increase as people see it's possible and people have their economic life increasingly locked down. We're seeing it more and more. We're seeing even people, like the solutions people use in the past for Bitcoin stop being options, and we're figuring out what the staying options might be, what qualities they need to have. The AI stuff's optimistic for me. I feel like if you're someone that, like it depends on who you are as well as what kind of resources you have, whether you're able to wrangle it. Because if you really don't have, like, I don't know how kids engage with this stuff naturally or to what degree they can, because the AI stuff I use is not free. But it is promising that we're over the hump of, like, use as many tokens as possible, spend $10,000 a month on tokens. It seems like around $100 a month, $200 a month, like less than $1,000 a month is how much, you can effectively use as an individual without your, like, just imparting your own judgment. And I don't know if there's some balance between, like, the cost of intelligence coming down and our ability to use intelligence and going up that keeps that at a level, but it seems like we overshot and it came back down. I'm rambling a bit.
No, I totally agree. We like way overshot. There's so many different like major corporations that like went full in on the, like, Uber's a great example. Is they had like an allocation for how much they were going to spend on Claude, and they literally gamified it to get like employees to use it more. And so many people are in this like, no, you need a prompting loop to have the AI, and Lubin just needs to go on and on until it solves problems and all this stuff. And I'm like, I am not that. And there's a reason Uber in like 3 months or 4 months burned through an entire year's worth of token allocation. And now they're like shutting the whole thing down, and they're like limiting everybody. And this is a common story now.
I feel like you had to err that way. It was important.
Yeah,
If
you had to oversubscribe.
Way, you weren't trying enough. Like, you didn't know where the benefit was. And I feel like most of the choices in life come down to, like, which direction do you want to make errors in? And I feel like that was the right direction. Yeah. And now everybody
knows. You have to oversteer one way. Which way? Yeah. No, I completely agree. In fact, I always think about like the economy and honestly life decisions, just like human decisions in a giant complex system, is driving blind and then feeling what has occurred after you steer. So like you don't know which way the road is turning, and you're trying to predict it from all of the little things and the pieces and the people you interact with. You're feeling the wind and the which way your car is leaning just a little bit or whatnot, and you're just blindfolded the whole time. And so you turn one way, and then you get and you're like, oh shit, and and you turn back. Like that is the process of life and economic progress. You have to find the barrier and do it wrong a little bit too far to know which way you have to turn back. And price and economic systems work exactly the same way. You only know a price is overbought or oversold if there's an opportunity to profit from it. Like it's only when it's too high that you then realize there's an opportunity to get it lower, like et cetera, et cetera. Like, again, it's blind until you start the interaction with it. Maybe you don't want to talk about this, and that's totally fine. But I feel like I have to ask, just because it's Twitter and maybe it's just my feed's just full of it. What's your thought on, especially when we're talking about settlement and base layer stuff, what's your thought on spam? What's your thought on the whole fork conversation? Do you even have an opinion on it, or are you just like, I just need to work on Payjoin and just care about privacy? Or do you have like a philosophical or technical position on that at all?
Yeah, when mempool is empty, it's tough for me to like have that draw with so many other things on my plate. I'm definitely the guy at BitDevs who like tries to squirrel away from this conversation. Because like there's so many like really pressing dangers and problems and like things going off the rails that I've kind of stayed blissfully ignorant here. Like
honestly, it's probably the best. it's
Yeah,
probably for the
I
best.
don't get involved in the arguments. You can look at my Twitter. I don't know if you'll find I probably
I didn't see anything scanning, so I was just that's why I was just curious. Yeah.
I think, who do I need to shout out right now? The Bugle, you gotta follow the guys at the Bugle. I think even if you don't agree with them, that is my engagement with the filter conversation. To be honest with you, is
That's
I am
hilarious.
liking the Bitcoin Bugle pretty frequently because it's just funny. Yeah, I don't know. I wish I had something more substantial. It's just not my piece.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Excuse me. It's probably the safe way to do it. And I tend to agree. I've gotten wrapped up in it just because I respect and like people on both sides of this debate, and I feel like it's part of my obligation to try to learn and get conversations with both people on either side, because they're just gonna this side's just gonna call the other side a pedo, and this side's gonna say you're just technically retarded. And so if you don't have conversations, you're never actually gonna make inroads to anything.
In terms of consensus changes, though, I think there are opportunities in the future. I just don't really think the filter one is the most likely to manifest.
Yeah. I honestly don't think so either. And one of the points you brought up is that when the mempool's empty, it's hard to feel super, if fees were $50 for every settlement and we still had 60% JPEGs in every single block, that would make me convinced that we should think this should be considered a little bit more serious. Is that genuine monetary activity is being squeezed out by dick butts. But when the block is going to be 60% empty because most payments have been shifted over to Lightning, it's a question of whether or not there's even any sustainability to it. Does it exist at all at $50 a settlement? Because I think that's where we go. That's where this ends up. Granted, Steve might also challenge me on that, because we've basically been the same sats per byte for 12 years, and everybody's saying the fees are going to go high, the fees are going to go high, the fees are going to go high, and it hasn't. So I don't have much evidence other than just intuition that will end up there. But yeah,
we got to create the demand, right? The thing gets more effective, and then people want more of it, even though it's more expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. You brought up cross-input signature aggregation at the very beginning of this call, and I feel like that's where I could see some energy a year from now. Believe it or not, I know the proposals are making progress. Fabian Yar has been working on them, and there's some fun play with Payjoin. So the two of us pitched Cyphertank in Lugano last year, this idea of Payjoin input signature aggregation, because to make cross-input signature aggregation work with the full aggregation, you need to do interactivity, the sender and receiver, everybody that participates needs to do that. I don't know that the current version of Payjoin, two-party Payjoin, really works here, but if Payjoin is your fundamental interactivity protocol and CISA lets you, compress that even further, these things play really nice together, and you will see advancements there. There's two major things with Payjoin that can improve. There's how much better can you batch, and then how do you plug all the privacy holes? And they're kind of the same thing, because right now you have all these sideways leaks. You have all these other cluster problems. So beyond the ones we're really familiar with, there's a lot of new work about, if someone always does their transactions between noon and 2 p.m. East Coast time versus West Coast time, you probably can distinguish their clusters, even if there's some Payjoin between two people happening, beyond the multi-party heuristic, the common input heuristic. So we need to have the protocol evolved so that multiple people can come together and batch, which means more complexity. I think it just needs to happen gradually. But where I think there's just a lot more push for something like that to happen, cross-input signature aggregation, than some of the other proposals we've seen recently. If you can get a synergistic, you have some privacy, you have some batching. I think it's easier to get something across the line. Like the opcat stuff has not been easy to change. The post quantum has not been easy to change. The filter conversation, although not necessarily a fork conversation explicitly, is a dumpster fire. Like it's really not easy to never mind easy to change. Like it's not even easy to talk about. And like Taproot came and people didn't really implement it. They kind of did. I mean, now everyone takes it, but
slowly. Actually, how does that interact? I'm curious about Payjoin Dev Kit and everything. How does Taproot? Do you have Taproot by default? Taproot implementation at all? Like how do you use that? Or are you not even worried about it? You're just kind of focused on like getting it to work with the normal setup now,
in terms of dominant mechanism for Payjoin. Like it doesn't even, you really need to use the Bitcoin network, to be honest. As long as you can send a payload that is a transaction, the Payjoin protocol doesn't care. So you could use it on any network. You can use Taproot or any sort of script. The first version.
So it's not really tied to anything in particular. Like if your wallets both use Taproot, you can just use Taproot in the same way. So
there's fingerprint problems, big fingerprint problems. If your wallet is constantly using Taproot and my wallet's constantly using SegWit, we can Payjoin, we can break the common input heuristic, but like our fingerprints are still
really help
distinct. So until you get a bunch of people like multi-party Payjoin, multiple receivers, multiple cut-throughs, that's a big privacy problem. It only really helps the clusters that have similar fingerprints. But Payjoin itself is you need to implement the transaction construction, and then the library takes care of the network messages and the serialization and like persistence. But as long as you have some sort of transaction you want to send to your counterparty, like a PSBT, if you want to get jargony, then you can do the Payjoin. The Payjoin dev kit and the protocol doesn't care about scripts. The way I like to think about it is the wallet should be concerned with the like policy, like what kind of transactions they want to participate in terms of fee rate, in terms of script, in terms of amount. And then the Payjoin protocol is just to coordinate the two to be able to have that conversation. The Payjoin protocol, especially BIP77, sort of refined the stuff in the V2 from the V1. So the async version really, and in the effort to do that, we even edited the V1 so that the wallet can make the wallet decisions, and then Payjoin is really just about enabling the conversation.
Okay. I'm curious. It's a little bit reversion to something we talked about that I want to just get clarity on. In the context of the interactivity, how does the signature work in the context of adding? So let's say we have three people. Since I brought them up like 3 times, Steve, myself, and you. And you are sending me a transaction. Then like I give you an address and you like make a transaction, but then you send me the actual transaction out of band so that I can like add something to it. Do you then need another interaction? And can I send it on to Steve because like I'm paying him in part of this, and then he can tack onto like, is this like it is an interactive thing that we can expand the transaction, but can it still just be tacked on again like another time? Could this be passed around in like a group of 5 people? Or does it then have to go back to each person to sign each new piece? You know, like I have to sign it with Dan and Guy, and then Steve has to sign it with Dan, Guy, and Steve. You know what I mean? Like how does the construction of the signatures and the kind of proof of the pieces of the transaction occur, since hashes and stuff change every single time?
Yeah, the signing. This could be broken down into roughly what exists today and what's possible. So
Okay.
today we do have one round of interactivity, which means I send you a message, you send a message back to me.
Okay.
But it's possible to make a protocol that has multiple rounds of interactivity or communicates with multiple people. So to answer your first question about like, how does this work with signatures when I send you some money and you want to also cut through to Steve, if I understand the example, you'd give me your Payjoin URI, which contains the address and the mailbox information. And I would send you a fallback transaction that pays however much you asked for in that URI. It's got some amount too, say. You then do what's called output substitution, where you alter the transaction. So you replace the output that pays you with an output to Steve, say, and you also have a chance to add your own input. And then that's it. You could also do change, where you could replace your output to you with one to Steve and one to yourself if you don't want to forward all the money I'm sending you to Steve. So yeah, that invalidates my transactions, of course, because it depends on, there's some nuances, but typically people use sig hash all. You're signing the whole transaction, and that you got to invalidate my transactions, but you'd still sign your input and you'd give it back to me then. And not only do I have the signature on the transaction if you contribute your input, but we also have a signature out of band, like all these Payjoin messages are signed. So I know it comes from you no matter what. I know it's associated with that key that you gave me in the URI when you gave me your address. So I have this message potentially with output substitution that is the Payjoin now. It's your proposal of what's a Payjoin. It's still spending my inputs, but maybe that address changed from Guy's to Steve's. And because I still have this Payjoin protocol signature, I know it's from you. I'm comfortable signing the transaction and saying, okay, I know this message came from Guy. I'm not spending any more Bitcoin than I was before. And then I broadcast that to the network. And so you're watching it for the network. And when Steve opens his wallet, if the output was meant for him, he's going to say, oh, I got some money. And he probably thinks the input came from you. He doesn't even know. He probably gave you that address, labeled it Guy, and it just shows up in his wallet as from Guy. But I actually sent it. And that's where the cut through, the net settlement is like, I think, a boon for privacy, especially because, you only have the information you need. Steve only knows, oh, I got some money from Guy, but it doesn't mean the actual input is from Guy anymore.
And what's funny is that, like, I know I could totally change how I do. I would actually like to be able to. Oh, wait a second. I think I actually can do that. I think I can batch in Nunchuck, and I just don't do it. I think there's like a drop down that I can like add another thing.
Yeah, I think so.
That's so stupid.
Send money forward.
I totally should be doing that. Anyway, I do individual transactions all the time. You get used to doing the thing a certain way. So just to clarify, because this seems like respect for dealing with all this, because this seems just like super, super complicated, or just like nuanced in like the different pieces. But
I'm glad we're doing this at the end.
Yeah.
Like later, not at the first thing.
Is when you send me the transaction and I add my details to it and sign it, I cannot send it because any previous signature or whatever, since I've edited the details of the transaction, is no longer valid. And I have to send it back to you to do a final signing. And you would have to broadcast. I would not be able to broadcast by myself, correct?
Right. If you broadcast that, it would fail consensus. It's not a valid transaction.
Gotcha. Is there a way to, the non-interactivity holy grail, with CISA or something like that, to basically add without having to send it back and get a new signature and still have like a valid I've simply added my input and the signature for that piece of it to the witness data, whatever it is, and then broadcasted it. Is that possible where I could broadcast it, or I could send it back to you for you to broadcast? It doesn't matter. Anybody could broadcast it, and basically we can just have additive things.
Yeah,
to
when
the
you have
transaction.
conditions on a transaction, this is what's usually meant by like covenants. So there's,
Yeah.
you would need new script. I don't think without consensus changes to new script, this would really be possible.
Okay.
And yeah, there's a bunch of ways people have thought of doing this, but Payjoin is kind of like the really dumb way. If we assume there's not covenants,
just make it work.
Like, what can we do? Rather than like, how do we get around interaction to do the specific application? The frame Payjoin that I'm familiar with is working in is like, given interaction, as crappy as it is, and as much of a pain in the ass as it is, like if
As
we
good as
can
it
do
can
interaction,
be.
what are all the things that we can do with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Nice.
starting simple. So like the example you gave is we just have interaction and now we can already do all this cut through. Like I can deposit to an exchange and directly fund the people withdrawing. This is just with the basic 2-person Payjoin. Now,
that's great for batching with an exchange because it's just better for them.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's like also coming. Like stay tuned. You will see that soon. Yeah.
I'm actually curious on that note. Who have you been talking to? Because like a big part of this would obviously be getting everybody on board to use this. I would love to feel like, okay, now we have like some sort of a standard, some sort of a thing, the mechanism to use. Who's going to implement it? Do you know? Have you all been talking to people specifically? You mentioned Bull Bitcoin, and Cake. Who else? Like, what else do you see as being like low hanging fruit for like, if we could do this, we could get an enormous amount of support throughout the ecosystem, and then it would make sense for these other 5 or 10 wallets to implement it simply because it's available in this and this. Like what's your kind of like target or framing for like how to get people to jump on board?
I don't know if it's just one particular thing, because it's an interactive protocol. Like you need the counterparty to always have it, so it needs to be available for everyone to integrate. And the good thing is I think people are on board and they have been for years. People have been pretty unanimous that they're like, okay, Payjoin is an upgrade. It's kind of an optimization. If our 2 wallets are online, they can communicate and we should try to communicate. And if they don't, you fall back and it's fine. The real bottleneck has been the engineering to supply the demand. There just hasn't been a Payjoin dev kit before, and everyone needed to do their own integration. And after doing the Payjoin dev kit, like focusing on this for a few years, like it's complicated anytime you have interactivity. And if you look at Lightning as an example, like Bolt 11 was out everywhere forever, and now we have Bolt 12 like kind of making some progress. This stuff is just not easy. But we're past the point now where the bottleneck is engineering, which is a really like that was one of the reasons I think it makes sense to do the podcast now, because someone can genuinely take the Payjoin dev kit off the shelf and plug it in their wallet and use it. I think I can talk to Bull Bitcoin Exchange wanting to implement this because Francis has been, there's tweets from him from like 2020 probably, where he's like, oh, we need a white label Payjoin thing. I need to be able to use this off the shelf. The implementation is way too hard. Like, it's just not, it's not what I'm focused on. I think he would agree with this framing. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but like he's been very vocal and supportive of Payjoin.
He will. Yeah.
And the fact that he wants it for the exchange and it hasn't been possible. And I think once that is demonstrated as possible, especially with the mobile app where you don't even need to show it as a Payjoin at all. It's just like you click buy Bitcoin or sell Bitcoin and it totally happens in the background on the app. I think then others will come to see. There's active development on a BTC Pay Server plugin by community contributors, so by Valera and Chavik, who's sponsored by Btrust, that you will see. And I think that's another one where you had you have a bunch of people using it in BTC Pay, and if they can upgrade to the new version, and then Cake Wallet and Full Bitcoin can use them, and like I said, Cove is active. There's a bunch. There's like I have a long list of like 40 integrations, and yeah, stay tuned. If you have anyone in mind, I'm really curious who you think would be a good next target. You mentioned Hugo and Nunchuck. I think that's somewhere that we haven't been looking directly, because it's just a different bindings thing. But kind of the next thing on our roadmap after cutting this 1.0, which is like a this week thing, then the floodgates are open. Like the barrier to using the stuff is not that the protocol tech isn't ready or that the protocol implementation isn't ready. It's that like, oh, now I just need to wire it into my app. That's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
And I mean right now, like last week that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
This week now we're here. Like it's happening right now.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Now, I would love to see this be a standard because, like, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, this also is like a brilliant way to get around all the regulatory, like, problems or like targeting of like, oh, you're providing a service. It's like you can't tell me that I can't just like we're making a transaction together. Like you and I are making a transaction together. You can't tell me that I have to do it a certain way to not include you, that we can't share information separately and like add it to each other. It would be like, it's like you have to have a one-to-one message. You can't like out of bounds just like put two messages together somewhere else and then send it. I like the ability to subjectively define that from like a legal stance just sounds like an absurd task to me. You just have to make all communication illegal to essentially try to justify that. And I'm curious how do you think about it in that context? Is that sort of is that kind of part of your risk profile for why this is such a good way to do it? Because it's not a service provision. It's not a pool of privacy coins or whatever, it doesn't run into the Tumblebit service provider problem, like it's just like, are people allowed to communicate and like put a transaction together or are they not? And why wouldn't they be?
Both the fact that it's just a cooperative interaction happening without a service provider or like with an arbitrary service provider, like an arbitrary server, like it literally a mailbox, is very similar to Lightning, which is, getting Lindy. And it's not overt like the CoinJoin tech or like a mixer tech, if you can call it tech really, was before. It blends in and it's happening in the open. And it's transparent to both sides. So both sides know what's happening. It's not like I'm sending money into an abyss and trusting someone that the money gets to the other side. Like if we're participating in Payjoin, I know I'm getting exactly this much money. I have a record of exactly the money I put into it and what I got out of it. I think it's a lot more incentive compatible, especially when you can save fees. It's a lot harder to just like not want to do it if you're leaving money on the table, especially fees raise up, demand grows for Bitcoin in general as Bitcoin becomes more useful. So the whole shape has been designed with this in mind. Just like the focus has been on the thing that might have some longevity and staying power, which means making a lot of trade-offs, to be fair. Like if you're using a CoinJoin, even though it's probably harder to have specific privacy guarantees about it, it definitely seems to most people like they have better privacy than from their typical Payjoin, right? If you're using a CoinJoin and you have a new coin, it's not so clear exactly how much work it takes to figure out how to connect the input and output. Like maybe it's possible on some time scale with some analysis. Maybe it's even trivial if you have good enough math, but it sure seems like it's a lot harder than just looking at the raw Bitcoin ledger. With Payjoin, it's less clear, right? You're just like your counterparty still knows what you're doing. But these things work together. They're solving slightly different problems. And Payjoin is, especially with the Payjoin dev kit, is more of a platform to evolve the protocol. So once you have this interactivity, it's like, okay. And I think people thought, and maybe some people still think Lightning is this, but Lightning has a different complexity. Like Lightning, you're managing the state of all these different nodes. You have gossip. It is really a decentralized network. And if your goal is just like, what can we do if we have minimal interaction on Bitcoin? Maybe you don't want to implement Lightning node software every time you plug your hardware in, like your hardware wallet. Maybe your vault is not that. So it serves a slightly different niche that all plays together. And for the exchanges, like if they're still getting the same information from their customer, they know how much money they got, they still KYC them. I don't think that changes their compliance posture at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. And one of the things that I really like about this type of proposal, and the one that comes to mind that kind of had a similar privacy profile, or had a similar relationship to this one element, is something like Dandelion. The propagation delay protocol. You flip a little coin to for sending out a transaction on the network, so that you can't time how you received the transaction at different points in the network with different nodes, and then basically trace it back to where it came from, to the original node that it came from. But one of the things that I thought was really, really interesting when I was digging into how it worked and how it affected privacy at scale was that, like, if 20% of the network or 30% of the network adopted Dandelion, basically the heuristic for telling what happens to the other 70% of the transactions is broken, because you still just don't know if there was a Dandelion somewhere in the mix. So, like, partial adoption breaks the reliability of pinpointing the people who aren't using it. And one of the interesting things about Payjoin, aside from the simple like one UTXO to two UTXOs, anything that's slightly batched or has multiple UTXOs, multiple inputs, and multiple outputs, which, a lot of normal wallet transactions, tons of mine are multiple UTXOs to multiple UTXOs, just because I don't have enough in one UTXO to send a transaction. And because of that, nobody has any clue whether or not that was a Payjoin or not, except me.
Right. And so just by having Payjoin too, you're doing,
if you had 20% adoption
network.
Yeah. If you had 20% adoption and there are 40% of the network is multiple UTXOs to multiple UTXOs, you have no way of knowing that only half of those are Payjoin, or if all of them are Payjoin. All of you fundamentally alter the heuristic for the entire network just by having partial adoption. And that's a really powerful element, that it's privacy in the open, so to speak. And that you're actually helping the anonymity set, even if everybody doesn't get on board. So that's always a really cool element. I love the kind of nuance of these types of solutions to those problems. Yeah, shit, we are already okay. We're at an hour and 55, and I got construction guys probably going to show up here in a minute. Any other final thoughts or anything you want to add? I love this stuff, and I'm happy to be able to, if any of the audience doesn't know about this or hasn't heard about it yet, like, it's super awesome. Everybody should check it out. Everybody should follow you. Everybody should follow everything that's going on with Payjoin. Is there anything else you want to add or something you want to share for everybody who's listening before we close this out?
Yeah, I got to thank the donors to the contributors of Payjoin Dev Kit. You've got Spiral, OpenSats, Human Rights Foundation, Maelstrom, Vintium sponsoring some contributors, B-Trust, MIT DCI. Like, there's a lot of people that are unnamed to Cake Wallet who've generously supported and made this possible in a decentralized way. and it's growing. You can go to payjoin.org to check it out. I'm at Gould, BITGOULD on Twitter. Yeah, if you are in a position to do an experiment with a wallet or service, I would urge you to point your Fable 5 or whatever subscription you have at the dev kit released and try to get a demo working. I know like 3 weeks ago, around the time of BTC Prague, there was a demo of an ARC getting onboarded, like a cashewman getting onboarded. The cashewman backed by an ARC doing this cut through. So typically, because the ARC transaction is complicated, it's not like your regular wallet knows how to board the ARC. But if your regular wallet supports Payjoin, it can send some funds to this complex wallet. The complex wallet can do a cut through that pegs into the ARC, send it back to the Payjoin wallet, and you can board the ARC in one transaction. So I'm seeing, and this is all vibe coded, like by Matt. Yeah. So this is, we're seeing, like I said, the time has come for integration if you're excited and want to experiment. And if you've got, more complex service or hardware exchange, I encourage you to reach out and experiment, because I think you'll find some success.
That's awesome. That's awesome, dude. Well, shout out to you and everybody who's been working on this. Like, I have endless respect for, especially the more I try to dig in to have projects of my own development. I have more and more respect for the people who actually stick to it and get things to the finish line and produce things that other people need and use and really, really value. Because if we don't have thousands of people doing every little piece of this, like, it doesn't move forward. And it's wild how much like one person can actually make a difference, and how little value or how maybe gratitude that we just kind of like, somebody will do it. Like, we just kind of like hand wave it away sometimes. So shout out to you, everybody with Payjoin, and everybody who's just everybody who's tried and failed, and everybody who's donated to all of this. Like, it's just awesome to see it. I, like you, am an endless optimist, and it's awesome to keep having conversations like this and seeing things move piece by piece to the place that we want to end up. So thanks, man.
Yeah, and thanks to all the contributors. There's lots of people who
seriously
tirelessly work on this mission, and people don't even know about it. And a lot of the time it's for free, even though there's a lot of donations. There's a lot of the time people contribute because they're just motivated. They just want to see it happen. So thanks to everyone that's contributed.
That's awesome, man. Well, dude, shoot me any links or anything to make sure I get it all in the show notes. So I'll grab my AI to list out everything that you said here at the end. And I should have it all, but if you think of something, just shoot me a DM. Let me know.
Cool. Thanks, Guy.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for coming on. This is awesome. That'll wrap us up. Another shout out to Dan. Another shout out to everybody who is, all the dozens of people who have put, maybe 100 more people who have made this happen, not only in this current iteration and the contributors, but in the past, the donors, the previous projects that, came and went, to make this all possible and get to an implementation that may get more steam and may go further than all previous ones, having learned critical lessons. God, I would love to see this implemented far more broadly, especially with exchanges. In fact, I didn't even mention it to Dan, but I think he should go for Strike, River, Swan, Bull Bitcoin, Coin Floor. I think, all of this, maybe Coinbase. I don't know. Maybe Coinbase is a lost cause. But to get the service providers to do this. And I love the little setup he talked about with ARC and how cool you could do some of these little systems and consolidations. So check it out if you're a builder, if you're building a wallet, if you work with a service, like let's say you work for Swan or you work with Strike or something, make some noise, push it up the ladder. talk to people. Let's see if we can get this implemented, because I would love just like one notch, like get to better privacy in a way that doesn't require everybody to download a special wallet or adopt some specific service or anything like that. Like this is how we make real progress, in my opinion. And this is just really, really promising. So excited, super excited. I'll be sharing it out. I'll have links and details in the show notes in the description. So you should be able to find it really easy. I'll have everything that I can get. I already got, Dan's going to send me any links that I missed. And get yourself a BitBox too. This perfect way to hold your own keys, and then also use it with a Payjoin implemented wallet. Beautiful. Hold your own keys and privacy. It's just the way to go. And you get a discount and you help out the show and share it out with everybody you know. This show lives entirely on word of mouth and you sharing it with people that you know and who want to hear about cool things and learn more about Bitcoin. So that'll do us. Thank you guys for listening. Get a BitBox, support the show, subscribe, follow everybody and all the projects, and I will catch you on the next episode. Until then, that's my 2 cents.